So if you were to ask someone for a political stance that champions, like, totally open borders and unrestricted global movement, you probably assume they're a staunch progressive.
Right, yeah. That is the standard assumption people make.
But what if one of the absolute strongest arguments for open borders actually comes from hardline libertarians? I mean, people defending strict private property rights.
It completely flips the script. And, you know, if you want to look at a nation with an incredibly high proportion of foreign-born residents, you really shouldn't look at the United States.
Which sits at what, like 14%?
Exactly, 14%. Instead, you should look at a country like Switzerland, which is sitting at roughly 30%.
Wow, 30%.
Yeah. It really shakes up all those baseline assumptions we tend to bring to this conversation.
It really does. Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking one of the most visceral and complex issues of our time, which is immigration.
Right. But we're doing it a bit differently today.
Yeah, exactly. We are intentionally stepping away from the daily news cycle, ignoring the usual talking points. Instead, we're looking at the underlying philosophical bedrock of it all.
Because that's where the real debate actually happens.
Exactly. So we're using excerpts and this really excellent presentation on chapter 21, which is called The Ethics of Immigration. And this is from Louis Vaughn's 2024 textbook, Doing Ethics.
It's a phenomenal text, honestly, mostly because it forces us to just strip away all that immediate emotion we feel when we talk about borders.
Right. It asks us to examine the actual structural foundation of our beliefs.
Yeah.
Regarding human rights and national duty.
Yeah. And Vaughn's textbook actually has this really intriguing cover art.
Oh yeah, the dog.
Yeah, it's a dog sitting quietly at a fork in a dirt road, just looking out at this landscape of mountains and trees.
It is such a brilliant visual metaphor for where you, the listener, are sitting right now with this topic. I mean, we are all at an intellectual crossroads here, having to choose between deeply conflicting moral pathways regarding, well, who gets to cross a border and why.
But before we step onto any of those paths, we need to lay down a really critical ground rule for you listening.
Yes, very important.
Because we're dealing with immigration, which is inherently tied to politically charged concepts, this deep dive is an entirely neutral exploration.
Completely neutral.
We are not taking sides here. We absolutely are not endorsing any specific viewpoint, whether that's left, right, or center.
Right.
Our singular mission today is strictly to impartially report and analyze the philosophical frameworks and the data presented in Vaughn's text.
So you can weigh the arguments on their own merits. Basically, we are just your tour guides through the philosophy today, not politicians.
Exactly. Just the tour guides.
So where do we actually start with this? Like, how do we construct a functional, ethical argument about immigration from scratch?
Well, any intelligent argument about immigration requires two distinct components working together. First, you obviously need a moral principle.
Like a guiding philosophy about what's right or wrong.
Right. And honestly, the moral principles are usually the easy part to grasp. We all generally know what fairness or duty feels like.
Sure.
But the second component is what philosophers call non-moral facts.
Okay, non-moral facts, meaning what exactly?
Basically, the empirical, on-the-ground realities. The raw data.
Like the history, the economics, demographic shifts, that sort of thing.
Precisely. And this is where the wheels tend to fall off the debate. Because to apply a moral principle effectively, you need an intensely accurate picture of reality.
And solid, non-moral facts about immigration are just notoriously hard to agree upon.
Yeah, they are. Before we can argue about what ought to be, we really have to establish what actually is.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's lay down that reality based purely on the source data.
Let's do it.
So the modern U.S. immigration landscape was fundamentally rewired back in 1965. This was the Immigration and Nationality Act.
Right, a massive turning point.
Huge, because prior to that, the U.S. relied on a really strict demographic quota system that heavily favored Western European immigrants.
It was very restrictive.
Very. But the 1965 Act basically blew that quota system up. It replaced it with a framework that prioritized two main things. First, skilled workers who could fill specific labor gaps.
Yeah.
And second, family reunification for individuals who are already in the country.
And that legislative shift is really the mechanical engine behind the demographic flow we see today. So if you fast forward to the text's data from 2017, the U.S. had 44 million foreign-born residents living within its borders.
And that encompasses both legal and unauthorized individuals, right?
It does, yes. Both categories. And those 44 million people, That equates to 14% of the total US population.
Which is exactly what brings us back to that staggering Swiss statistic from the intro.
Right, because 14% sounds massive if you're just looking at it in a vacuum.
Totally. But when you look at Canada at 21% or Switzerland at 30%, you realize that having a large immigrant population isn't some weird anomaly.
No, not at all. It's actually a structural feature of most modern wealthy nations.
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. sees about 1 million immigrants enter annually, and over 1 million become lawful permanent residents each year.
And just to be clear, we don't need to spend time today rehashing the basic legal distinctions, like the difference between someone formally deported for a violation versus a refugee fleeing persecution.
Right, because anyone following this debate generally knows those baseline definitions already. The text doesn't dwell on them either.
No, it doesn't. But the source material does point out a massive roadblock to this entire ethical conversation.
The misconceptions.
Yes, the sheer volume of factual misconceptions. Misconceptions are the absolute poison of ethical reasoning.
They really are. The text actually lists several pervasive ones that routinely distort this debate.
Like the belief that immigrants commit more crimes than native-born citizens.
Right, or the idea that they broadly drain the economy or, take jobs away.
Or the notion that undocumented workers don't pay any taxes.
Yeah, that's a big one. Or even that demographic panic that Hispanics will imminently become the majority while white people become a minority.
Right, so all these empirical misconceptions are floating around.
And here is the crucial question for you listening. How do those factual misconceptions actually break the moral arguments we're about to dive into? Like, let's say I have a flawless moral compass, right?
Okay.
But my data, my non-moral facts, are entirely wrong. Where does that leave me?
Well, it essentially leaves you advocating for policies that fundamentally violate your own moral principles.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Think of it like a logical mechanism. Let's say you're overriding moral duty. Your core principle is to protect your nation's economic stability, specifically for the working class.
Okay, tracking with you.
If you operate on the false empirical belief that a specific immigrant group is draining the economy, well, your moral duty forces you to advocate for closed borders.
Because you think you're protecting the working class.
Right. But what if the actual data proves that this same group is, say, revitalizing struggling industrial sectors, or paying into a tax base that they legally cannot even draw from?
Oh, I see.
Then applying that exact same moral duty to protect the economy would demand that you keep the borders open.
Wow, so it's literally garbage data in, garbage ethics out.
Exactly. You end up fighting against the very thing you think you're protecting simply because your map of reality was upside down.
That is wild, which is exactly why establishing empirical truth is the inescapable first step. You just can't skip it.
You cannot skip it.
Okay, so once the empirical dust settles, Vaughn's text introduces us to the first major ethical framework, cosmopolitanism.
Right, cosmopolitanism.
Which is essentially the argument for a world without borders.
Yes.
It's grounded in the idea that wealthy nations have a moral obligation to ease the suffering of the world's poor.
Yes.
And, crucially, that this obligation applies equally to everyone, whether they are a citizen or not.
And the mechanism of cosmopolitanism is fascinating because it basically treats national borders as morally arbitrary.
Like they don't mean anything.
Right. They're viewed as just historical accidents, lines drawn by ancient wars, or like where a river happens to flow.
Yeah, that makes sense.
From this perspective, being born in a wealthy, stable country versus a destitute one is nothing more than a geographic lottery.
Pure luck.
Pure luck. And the Cosmopolitan argues that you shouldn't be allowed to hoard the winnings of that geographic lottery behind a militarized border just because you got lucky.
So the text breaks this cosmopolitan view down into 3 supporting pillars. The first one is egalitarianism.
Which is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it basically says every human has equal moral worth. So restricting their movement and their opportunities based entirely on where they happen to be born is fundamentally unjust.
Egalitarians argue that if you truly believe in human equality, then allowing open borders isn't just like a compassionate policy.
Right.
It is a structural necessity to eliminate the vast, unjust economic inequality we see across the entire globe.
Okay, so that's the moral equality angle. Then there is the second pillar, which is utilitarianism.
Right.
And this framework kind of ignores the abstract concept of intrinsic rights. Instead, it focuses entirely on consequences.
Specifically generating the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Right, the classic utilitarian calculus.
Exactly. Under cosmopolitan utilitarianism, Closed borders are seen as this massive artificial economic bottleneck.
A bottleneck, like it's slowing things down.
Yeah, think about the fundamental logic of free trade. If capital and resources and goods can flow freely across borders to find the most efficient markets, why shouldn't human talent?
That's a really good point.
When you trap ambitious, capable people in regions with failing institutions or zero economic opportunity, you're squandering global human capital.
You're wasting it.
Totally. Opening borders acts as an economic lubricant. It maximizes overall prosperity and happiness by letting labor move exactly where it's needed and where it's most valued.
Okay, so we have egalitarians fighting for moral equality and utilitarians fighting for maximum global GDP. But here is where the source material takes a wildly unexpected turn.
Yeah, this is the really surprising part.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. The third pillar supporting cosmopolitan open borders is libertarianism.
Which sounds like a contradiction.
Right. Usually when we think of libertarianism, we think of limited government, strict private property rights, and really strong national sovereignty. So how on earth does a libertarian arrive at an open border policy?
It really comes down to analyzing who is actually being restricted by a border wall.
Okay.
We naturally assume that immigration laws restrict the foreigner, right?
Of course.
But the libertarian argues that immigration laws primarily restrict the native-born citizen.
Okay, let's map this out with an analogy because this is fascinating. Imagine you own a manufacturing plant or a farm or even just a house.
Right, your private property.
Exactly. If you want to hire a worker from another country because they are the absolute best person for the job, or even if you just want to invite a foreign friend onto your property.
Yeah.
The federal government stepping in to say, no, they don't have the proper visa. That is a direct, aggressive violation of your private property rights as the citizen.
Because the government is dictating who you can and cannot associate with on land that you literally own. It restricts your freedom of contract.
The state is essentially telling you how to run your business and who you can invite into your own home. The libertarian views this as massive government overreach.
Exactly. And simultaneously, it violates the foreigner's fundamental human right to freedom of movement. So it's a dual violation of rights.
This creates such an incredible philosophical alliance. I mean, you have progressive egalitarians wanting to end global poverty standing shoulder to shoulder with hardline libertarians who just want the government off their property.
It's strange bedfellows, for sure.
Sure.
They arrive at the exact same conclusion, open borders through completely different moral pathways.
It sounds incredibly principled. You treat every human on Earth exactly the same. You let the free market of global labor move without friction, and you respect property rights.
Sounds perfect on paper.
Right, but there's a massive blind spot here. Human nature. Because nation states do not actually operate like global charities. Humans don't treat strangers the exact same way they treat their own families. And that friction brings us directly to the opposing framework in the text, anti-cosmopolitanism.
Right, and anti-cosmopolitanism doesn't claim that we should just pull up the drawbridge and ignore the rest of the world entirely.
No, it's not complete isolationism.
Not at all. It fully acknowledges that wealthy nations do have moral obligations to ease the suffering of the global poor.
Okay.
But it argues that our obligations to our own citizens carry significantly more moral weight.
It's that core conviction that charity and duty really begins at home. And this preference for compatriots is the bedrock justification for closed borders.
And what's really interesting here is that anti-cosmopolitanism also uses utilitarianism to build its case.
Oh, so they're playing the consequences game too.
Exactly. They are also looking at outcomes, but they are forecasting a completely different set of results. They argue that throwing open the gates wouldn't maximize global happiness at all. They think it would be catastrophic.
So the source outlines several specific utilitarian arguments against open borders. And the most prominent mechanical argument is this tension between a robust welfare state and open borders.
Right, the economic strain.
Yeah, because a nation that provides substantial social safety nets, things like public health care, unemployment benefits, public education, that system relies on a very delicate balance of taxation and usage.
And if you suddenly remove all border restrictions, the anti-cosmopolitan utilitarian argues that this delicate system would just be instantly overwhelmed.
Just break under the pressure.
Precisely. A massive influx of vulnerable people needing immediate assistance would break the welfare infrastructure, basically causing it to collapse under its own weight.
It's the economic reality that you can have open borders or you can have a generous welfare state, but you absolutely cannot have both simultaneously.
The math simply does not work for them.
Right. But beyond the economic strain, the anti-cosmopolitan framework also points to the threat against a nation's distinctive culture.
Yes.
And we aren't just talking about, local cuisine or language changing. We're talking about the underlying social cohesion and the shared democratic values that allow a society to actually function.
Social cohesion acts as a civic lubricant. And when that cohesion breaks down due to an impossibly rapid influx of different cultural norms and political expectations,
Things get messy.
very messy, the result can be severe political instability.
Right.
And furthermore, they point to the fundamental duty of a state to protect its citizens from external security threats. Controlling who enters the country is viewed as a basic, non-negotiable prerequisite for a secure state.
So, as a listener, you are tasked with weighing these massive utilitarian predictions against each other.
It's a heavy lift.
It really is. Like,
Yeah.
will opening borders unlock unprecedented global GDP and lift millions out of poverty, as the cosmopolitans predict?
Or will it bankrupt local welfare systems and fracture the social cohesion necessary for a functioning democracy, like the anti-cosmopolitans warn?
Right. But relying on economic forecasts is a pretty dangerous game, isn't it? Because economic data is just constantly shifting.
It's always changing, which prompts some philosophers to step away from utilitarianism entirely and ask a totally different question.
Which is what?
What if a nation has an intrinsic right to close its borders, regardless of whether the economic outcome is positive or negative?
Oh, wow. Okay, this brings us to Christopher Heath Wellman and his non-consequentialist argument in the text.
Yes,
Wellman doesn't care about GDP or welfare math at all. He builds his case entirely around this fundamental freedom of association. And he uses an analogy that I just find absolutely fascinating.
the marriage one.
Yes, he compares a sovereign nation to a marriage.
It is a highly provocative comparison. He basically argues that just as individuals have a universally recognized right to choose their marital partner, or to choose the people they practice religion with, a group of citizens has the collective right to determine who they invite into their political community.
Wait, comparing a whole country to a marriage? That sounds pretty extreme. Is Wellman basically saying a country has the right to, swipe left on anyone they want for any reason, just like a person on a dating app?
I mean, honestly, that is exactly the logical extension of his argument.
That's wild.
Yeah. If an individual's freedom of association means they are entitled to remain entirely single and reject any proposal, then a state's freedom of association means it is entitled to exclude all foreigners from its political community, period.
So it completely bypasses all the messy empirical data about economics and crime rates.
Totally irrelevant to him.
Wellman is saying it doesn't matter if an influx of immigrants would magically double the nation's GDP overnight.
Nope.
If the citizens simply do not want to associate with them, they have a fundamental moral right to close the door. Just like you have the right to reject a marriage proposal from a billionaire if you simply don't want to marry them.
Exactly. It's about intrinsic rights, not economic results.
Right.
But Wellman isn't the only philosopher arguing for closed borders from a non-consequentialist angle. The source also introduces Stephen Macedo.
Oh yes, Macedo focuses on something called the justice principle and this concept of special obligations.
Right. Macedo is looking really closely at distributive justice.
Which is essentially the mechanism of how a society distributes its wealth, its burdens, and its opportunities, right?
Exactly. He argues that because citizens share a political life and subject themselves to the same laws and taxes, they owe each other a level of distributive justice that they simply do not owe to people in other countries.
It's kind of similar to the burning house scenario, right? Like, you might care deeply about your neighbor's children, but if your own house is on fire, you are morally obligated to save your own children first.
That's the exact logic. Macedo argues that in aiding people, we must give absolute priority to the poorest and most vulnerable of our own compatriots.
And this leads to a very specific, interlocking argument about immigration policy. Macedo argues that if high levels of immigration by low-skilled workers make it unlikely that we can fulfill our moral obligations to our own poorest citizens,
then we are morally required to stop that immigration.
Right, but what's fascinating here is how fragile that argument actually is when you really look at it.
Oh, it's incredibly fragile.
Because Macedo's entire moral justification for restricting borders is balancing on the edge of a single empirical claim.
Yes.
His argument assumes it is a proven non-moral fact that low-skilled immigration harms poor native-born citizens. It acts like gravity in his philosophical equation.
Right. His logic is perfectly sound, but its truth is entirely dependent on that empirical reality. Premise 2.
So what happens if economists conduct a massive study and definitively prove that low-skilled immigration actually creates entirely new managerial layers of jobs that elevate the poorest native-born citizens?
Well, if that non-moral fact flips, Maceto's empirical pillar crumbles.
This completely falls apart.
Completely. And if that pillar crumbles, his own moral principle of distributive justice would suddenly demand that we keep the borders open.
Wow.
Because if immigrants help the economy, open borders would be the best way to fulfill our special obligation to help our poor compatriots.
It perfectly illustrates why you literally cannot debate the ethics of immigration purely from an armchair or a debate stage.
You really can't.
You have to be in the weeds with the sociologists, the economists, and the data analysts. Your moral principles are essentially useless without a highly accurate map of reality.
It requires a constant, rigorous synthesis of philosophy and data.
Which brings us full circle. The ethics of immigration aren't just a matter of screaming talking points across a dinner table. They are this incredibly dense, tightly woven fabric of empirical facts, libertarian property rights, cosmopolitan ideals of global equality, and anti-cosmopolitan duties to our neighbors.
It really is a complex puzzle where changing one piece alters the entire picture.
It really is.
And as we wrap up, let me just reiterate one more time. Our goal today was simply to act as your tour guides through chapter 21 of Lewis Vaughn's textbook.
Right, staying totally neutral.
We are not advocating for a borderless world, nor are we advocating for a fortress nation. We just wanted to hand you the philosophical tools to navigate this terrain yourself.
Exactly.